I mean, I could sit here and watch these all day.
Right, this was so interesting to me. All right, bro, we live, baby.
Good.
So dumb.
Why do I do this every time?
You're an embarrassment. Sac passe. What's going on, guys? My name is Alex.
And I'm Allen.
Welcome to the Amicy channel.
Welcome.
Guys, listen, if you're not a part of the Amicy gang, click on that subscribe button below and join us to be part of the squad, all right?
Oh, God.
Today we've got the bizarre conspiracy theory of the Tartaria and the mud flood. Some people say it's a conspiracy. Some of us will say it's a fact.
It's a theory.
We shall soon find out. Let's get into this.
What if many American buildings weren't built, but discovered? What if they were already here, long before America even existed? Believers in the Tartaria conspiracy theory think that these buildings are the key to a lost past. Or maybe...
Because I think, like, one of the things that people were kind of talking about is the fact that, buildings that were in, like, the United States and buildings that were, like, in, like, Cuba, different countries, are very similar. And then somebody was like, trying to tell me that every country hired the exact same architect to build to do these things, or, you know,
maybe lost isn't the right word. They don't think it was lost, they think it was deliberately covered up by a vast global conspiracy involving all of the world's governments and historians. Tartaria is still a relatively new and relatively small conspiracy. Most people still have no idea what Tartaria even is.
It's true.
It's nowhere near as popular as something like Flat Earth. Most Tartaria-related content is here on YouTube or on Reddit, where there are now multiple subreddits dedicated to this supposedly lost empire. It's not a super strict conspiracy with a specific narrative. It's not an idea with leaders or organization. It's kind of more like a conspiracy cafeteria, where people on the internet can come in and pick and choose what they want. The basic premise is that there is an alternate history from the one most people know. There was once a vast, very technologically advanced Tartarian empire that came from North Central Asia. They created and influenced cities and infrastructure all over the world. So what happened? Why aren't we all living in Tartaria today? Well, unfortunately for the Tartarians, their entire empire was destroyed in a massive mud flood. This massive landslide that somehow appeared wiped them all out somewhere between 100 and 200 years ago, burying them under the earth.
That's a huge chunk.
Only the tallest of their buildings were able to survive. The history of Tartaria was erased.
Ain't no way.
After this great reset, the history of
bro, look at that.
Okay, this not just random. They even say that looks like the picture that they showed you about the
Pyramid.
The pyramid
That you're
in like
seeing the
New
top
York,
of it.
about New York having the underground city.
Well, yeah. So it's like that to me, like, makes so much, like, it's just crazy to think about, right? That, like, you're only seeing the top of the buildings versus what the buildings were actually like because of the mud flood. So, see?
What is
Tartaria was
that's trippy.
Right?
erased. After this great reset, the powers that be, whoever they are, decided to lie and claim that the buildings that were still around were built by them. Unwilling to admit that,
Because, like, if you look at, like, Egypt and stuff like that, they built essentially the greatest of all time, like, structural stuff, and from, like, the pyramids till now, what have they built?
Nothing that could match that.
Okay.
they were left over from Tartaria for whatever reason, people claimed that they themselves had built them. Modern-day Tartaria believers, of course, have seen through this lie, since no 19th century American could really have created these sorts of buildings. It must have secretly been a Tartarian architect. Opinions on when these buildings were really built differ. Some people actually claim that some buildings that people think were made in the 1800s were actually built 1,000 years ago. Tartaria had electricity way before when people today think the Industrial Revolution was, thanks to their advanced powers. They achieved such high levels of technology because their empire was based on peace and unity. Some Tartarian believers even go as far as to say that they built the pyramids in Egypt and the capital in Washington, D.C. The Tartarians, evidently, had a pretty diverse taste in architecture, since people give them credit for a wide array of different buildings. They even supposedly built the Taj Mahal. They made the Great Wall of China to keep the Chinese out of their vast empire, although modern historians will try to tell you that the exact opposite is true. Proponents of this conspiracy will basically point at any building that looks ornate and refined and claim that it's simply too advanced for some 19th century architect to have built. People who are still getting around in horse-drawn carriages could never have built it. They just didn't have the technology at that
This
time.
is crazy.
No, it must have instead been the genius Tartarians who constructed it during what we would think of as medieval times. The so-called Dark Ages, however, were in fact way more advanced than we give them credit for, thanks again to the Tartarians. 19th century American cities are apparently full of buildings that are left over from Tartaria. This means that the empire stretched all the way from Siberia to the western United States. Tartaria enthusiasts say it's just not possible.
Like Siberia's in Russia, and if you go the opposite direction, you can see the United States from there. So it's like you can see across. It's wild.
For a bunch of cowboys out in the Wild West to have created these sorts of grand public structures. Things like state capitol buildings and city halls are often pointed at as examples of the hidden Tartarian legacy. The Tartarian conspiracy is a very visual one. Generally speaking, believers don't sit around writing up huge and elaborate treatises about the lost empire. Discussion mostly revolves around different pictures of buildings. Perhaps this is part of why it seems to be catching on. It's easy to get into. There's not a lot of reading required to get involved. If you want to see more videos about historical conspiracies and historical fact, consider liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification bell to catch future updates from the channel.
We're here for it.
The biggest thing that seems to be missing from the conspiracy is motive. Why would Tartaria be covered up and hidden from the public? What would be the point? Who would benefit from this elaborate global hoax?
Exactly.
It would have to be the greatest cover-up in all of human history. Some have suggested that there wasn't really a conspiracy at all. When the mud flood hit, so much was destroyed and so many people died that it basically disappeared on its own. The next generation stumbled across the buildings and just adopted them as their own, instead of saying that they found them already there. Does that make more sense than a deliberate lie? Not really, but then again, not too much does with this whole Tartaria thing. Others have said that there wasn't a mud flood at all. Instead, enemies of Tartaria used advanced weaponry to tactically remove Tartarian infrastructure. Throughout the idea of Tartaria, there's a general theme of war being a pretext for destroying more surviving traces of the empire. Napoleon invaded Russia in order to wipe out more evidence of Tartaria. When Germany invaded Russia in both world wars, they were trying to finish what he started. As you can see, belief in Tartaria is connected to a deep-rooted Russian paranoia about the West's activities. Whether they know it or not, people discussing Tartaria on the internet today are really just building off the ideas of a man named Anatoly Fomenko.
I believe him.
In the 90s, he wrote a series of books about his new chronology. He argued that the events of antiquity and the things we associate with ancient Rome and Greece actually happened during the Middle Ages. Mainstream history, he said, is about 1,000 years off. Most history before the year 1600 was basically just made up by the Vatican, the Holy Roman Empire, and the Russian.
I mean, they do own a lot of stuff.
The Vatican be lying to
Just like the library, they still haven't. You still can't even go in there and see what he got hidden.
Russian House of Romanov. They all worked together to cover up the real history of the world, which of course revolved around a global empire which he called the Russian Horde, but is essentially the same thing as Tartaria. The concept is most fully laid out in his book titled History, Fiction or Science, which was originally published in Russian. According to Fomenko, the grandfather of the Tartaria conspiracy, written history really only goes back as far as AD 800. Before that, nobody really knows what was going on, since the elites got rid of all the records. All the stuff people think happened before then actually took place between AD 1000 and 1500. The new chronology theory appeared alongside other similar conspiracies after the breakup of the Soviet Union. Russians used their newfound freedom of speech to come up with some of the craziest alternate histories that the Soviets would not have allowed. The far-reaching Slav-Turk Empire, which he calls the Russian Horde, played a dominant role in Eurasian history before the 17th century. The Huns, Goths, Bulgars, Cossacks, Belarusians, and Ukrainians were all just parts of Greater Tartaria. But Fomenko's ideas go beyond Tartaria, and he attempts to explain all kinds of things in order to fit his grand theory. Jesus, for instance, was actually Andronicus Komnenos, the emperor of Byzantium. that Jesus, who ended up in the false history books, is a sort of composite figure who combines aspects of the prophet Elisha, Pope Gregory VII, Saint Basil, and even Li Huanhou, a Chinese emperor. And yet, Fomenko writes that the real, deeply covered up Jesus was actually born in Crimea in 1152 AD and got crucified on Joshua's hill overlooking the Bosphorus. If you're confused, good. You should be. It would actually be more concerning if you weren't confused, and this all made perfect sense to you. Fomenko also writes that the cities of Jerusalem, Rome, and Troy were really all the same place.
I saw this video yesterday. This guy went to I think he was in Italy somewhere, and he was looking at the map, and all of the compass was backwards. So like your north is actually south, your south is actually north, your east is actually west, and your west is actually east. And it had, back in like the 1500s, it already had Missouri, all of the United States locations. It had Morocco, all these different things on the map.
Yes.
This was back in the 1500s.
Like it already had the names?
It already had all of them, yep.
Huh? You gotta show me that.
Yeah, I was like, what the frick, bro?
Ain't no way.
And because it was like they've been lying to us this whole time. So it's like because Morocco was founded in like later date, but he's like, why is it here? He goes, there's also Cairo here, but you can't say Cairo's in Egypt. It was just trippy, bro.
Oh, where it was kind of is it where it was saying like this is Egypt?
The map is wrong.
Oh, I don't know.
I'll show you.
Happened to these places actually happened at Yoros Castle, which is by Joshua's Hill in modern-day Turkey. And that's not Fomenko's only unique geographic idea. He also believes that the Hagia Sophia is actually the biblical Temple of Solomon. Solomon himself was actually an Islamic sultan named Suleiman the Magnificent. Rome is also quite misunderstood. According to Fomenko, the word Rome is really more of a placeholder than some sort of real city. The first Rome was actually an ancient Egyptian kingdom in the delta of the Nile that had Alexandria for capital. Then, of course, there was New Rome, which was actually Constantinople. And then there was the Third Rome, which was actually Constantinople, the Rome we think of as being Rome in Italy, and Moscow. Rome in Italy, the one that's Rome in real life, was founded around 1380 AD. The Russian Rome was the capital of the Russian horde, or Tartaria. This may seem a little bit convoluted, but you have to respect Fomenko for at least trying to have an explanation for everything, unlike a lot of current Tartaria enthusiasts. The idea that the timeline of history is wrong goes back way further than Fomenko. Contemporary conspiracy theorists are really just the latest iteration of something that has always been around in some form or another. In 1685, Jean Hardouin wrote his own history book, where he claimed that most Greek and Roman texts were actually written by Benedictine monks, not Greek and Roman people. When people asked Hardouin what the hell he was talking about and why he thought this, he made a dramatic promise. He swore that he would reveal why the monks had done this in a letter that could only be opened after his death. But when he died, the executors of his estate were unable to find any such letter.
What a surprise.
Either he made it all up, or those crafty monks destroyed that letter too.
I believe it.
Sir Isaac Newton was also not impressed with the prevailing chronology of his day. He's best known for boring things, like gravity and calculus. But he also wrote a book titled The Chronology of Ancient Kingdoms Amended. In it, he changes the dating of the Trojan War and the founding of Rome. The book treats certain figures of Greek mythology, such as Chiron the centaur and the Argonauts, as historical fact. It is worth noting that Fomenko, like Newton, was a brilliant mathematician. Sometimes people who are very intelligent in one area aren't necessarily knowledgeable about other areas. Will Tartaria catch on and find a bigger audience? Or will people eventually lose interest when the next
Okay, we got this one. Guys, that was the
advanced weaponry to tactic.
That still didn't tell us nothing.
I know, as usual. That was the
What the
bizarre
heck? I'm sorry, guys.
conspiracy of Tartaria and the Mud Flood.
It told us nothing.
Nothing, absolutely nothing. People suck.
This was like, really? You sat there and lied to us.
You freaking loser.
You told us nothing like this. I'm opening the curtain.
Mueller.
Look, like this. I'm opening the curtain.
Nothing.
Gotta be cooking in there.
Guys, we need more information.
Tell us more.
In order to discover the
Wait,
things
we also
that
gotta
you want us to know.
we also gotta give a disclaimer. If you guys don't see us, you already know what happened.
I am safe.
I did not harm myself.
Guys, listen. Catch us in the next video. We're trying to get some information.
Yes, we are.
Peace.
Peace.
I